Hi guys, welcome back from coffee. My name is Jason Clark, and before I start the next session, I just want you to just put your hand up if you've already heard of Tenable network security. Okay, not very many. All right, so I understand the job I have to do today. Okay, so we're going to be talking about measuring the effectiveness and demonstrating value in security, and in a way trying to demonstrate our value to other members of an organization, members that aren't necessarily technical. And to do that, I'm going to talk about some logos and some cool names for vulnerabilities, and why really I prefer not to dwell on those and wish that they, things like Heartbleed didn't get so much media notification, because it's diverted organizations down one track when they should be doing other stuff. So before I get into that, because not very many of you have heard of Tenable Network Security, I just wanted to introduce the company first of all. How many of you have heard of Nessus, the vulnerability scanner? Okay, so a few more of you. Okay, well, Tenable Network Security are the creators of Nessus, the world's most widely used vulnerability scanner. We provide standards for active and passive scanning. So I'll be talking a lot about passive scanning today because that's unique to us. We're the only company that does passive vulnerability detection. We're rapidly expanding across the world. We've got over 25,000 customers and just over 500 employees. And I want to talk about the employee number because when I started back in February, we were just 400 employees with a target to grow to 500 by the end of the year. We actually reached the 500 target just after halfway through the year. And then that final bullet point there, or the final point, we've just recently announced another round of funding. This is round B funding from Insight Partners and at the Accel Group of $250 million round B funding, which is a phenomenal amount of money. So everyone at Tenable is really excited. We're all expecting huge pay rises, but more realistically, it means that we're going to have a lot more clout in the marketplace. Okay, so I probably don't need to tell you, if you're all security practitioners, that new threats are being discovered every day. This is not news. I'm not trying to teach you something that you probably already know. What I want to talk about just briefly is the idea of giving logos to vulnerabilities and making news headlines. Because who would have thought on April the 6th, 2014, that your CEO would have come in and said to you, are we vulnerable to OpenSSL 101B vulnerability? They wouldn't know what they were talking about. Yet on April the 7th, once Heartbleed hit the headlines, that's exactly what they were doing. They were coming in and asking about this Heartbleed vulnerability that they'd heard about on the news that morning. And there's lots of examples of vulnerabilities that have these cool logos and these cool names. But really, if we look back on the last year, there have been some huge or massively dangerous vulnerabilities that have been discovered that are far more pose far more risk to your organization than the ones that get the cool names. And so what I find is happening is that these logos and these cool names are often making our security practice go down the wrong route. We're following the marketing and the media headlines rather than dealing with the things that we feel that we know we should be doing. And this is a common theme in security. People like new things, new technology, new products, new solutions. They're wowed by flashing lights on an appliance. When really, if we were to take a step back and start practicing some of the fundamentals of security first, we would significantly raise the bar and increase the overall risk posture and reduce the threats that we are exposed to. So let's take a step back. Let's have a think about what it is that we need to do. So obviously, we know I'm not going to teach you anything new here. I'm just possibly going to remind you that these are the important things that we need to get right before we start looking at possibly new zero-day threats that might be exciting and interesting, but won't necessarily be a threat to you in your particular circumstance. So there's some questions that you need to ask yourself. Number one, what critical assets, data, and vulnerabilities reside on your network? What controls should you put in place or should be implemented in your environment to protect the assets and your data? How can you add value to the overarching business goals? And how can you measure the effectiveness of the controls and identify failure? Okay. So if you can't answer these questions already, then maybe this is a good place to start. Other examples of getting the fundamentals right would be something like the SANS top 20 critical security controls. The SANS organization, who's now called, they've renamed themselves, they're called the Council of Cybersecurity or something like that. But if you look at the top 20 critical security controls, it gives you a complete list of 20 areas that you need to look into in order to properly secure your environment. So just to try and get away from security for a moment, let's take a real-world example of, let's imagine you're trying to lose weight, okay? Something that I should be doing. We all know what we need to do to lose weight. We need to count our steps, run further, get good sleep, climb stairs rather than taking the lift or the elevator, watch the calories that we eat, and set ourselves personal goals. Okay, so this is like the Fitbit, if you like. Okay, what I want to introduce is the idea of the Fitbit of security. Right, now that should have been a lovely little picture behind there, but somehow that picture's gone. But if we try and apply this idea of the Fitbit and using these measurements to get fit or to lose weight, we apply that to the network environment or security. These are the sorts of things that we should be looking at. We need to do asset discovery. We need to know what assets we have in our environment, because if we don't know what assets we've got, how can we start protecting them and putting the right controls in place? We need to understand the vulnerabilities in our environment. We need to keep a control over network and user access, and obviously we need to make sure that our malware defenses are configured correctly and up to date. Now, if you can't measure it or IT, then you can't control it. If you can't control IT, you can't report on it, and if you can't report on it, then you can't improve. Okay, so what I want to do is just show you through some screenshots of our product range how we can help you solve these problems. So Tenable take a 21st century approach to security. Now, quite a few of you have already heard of Nessus. What I want to introduce to you today is Security Center Continuous View, which is our enterprise solution. And the Nessus vulnerability scanner that you're familiar with is just one component of the overall solution. So we have the Nessus vulnerability scanner, the one that you're familiar with, that will be doing active scans for vulnerabilities in your environment. When I say active, what I mean is we're actually scheduling a scan to take place at a certain time. Maybe that's once a day, once a week, once a month, etc. We also have passive vulnerability scanners. These are scanners that will sit attached to a span port and sniff the network traffic. So they're looking for vulnerabilities in motion, if you like. So they'll be looking for things like botnet activity and more sort of web-related or network browsing type of activity. The next component is the log correlation engine, which is gathering logs from your log sources and looking out for threats, events that might be happening, indicating that vulnerability might actually be exploited in your environment. Now, all of these components are generating data, and all of that data is sent to our centralized console, Security Center, where we can start to look at dashboards, and we can start reporting and responding to that data. Okay. So up until now, what I've really shown you is our vulnerability solution. But we have competitors out there. There are other solutions that are also gathering data. And what I want to try to prove to you is that it's not just about collecting data. It's what we then enable you to do with that data once it's been collected. So when we do a vulnerability scan, we're scanning, let's say, 100 IPs in our environment. The first thing that the scan will do is do a discovery. You've provided it with a range of, an IP address range. It'll go out and determine, which of those IP addresses correspond to a host, a live host. So it's doing some discovery first. Once we've done the discovery, we'll then start to profile those devices. We'll work out what platform it is, what applications and services are running on those devices. Only when we've done that do we then start to look for the actual vulnerabilities. So we're gathering lots of information about the system that's really useful. Doing discovery covers off items 1 and 2 of the SANS top 20 critical security controls. Do an inventory of your hardware, and then do an inventory of the applications and services that are on those hardware. So we can use all of this information and expose it and make it available to you within the product. When you first log into the security console, you are taken to a dashboard. Now, we have hundreds of dashboards already built into the product, fitting different use cases that you may require. You can also completely customize these or create your own dashboards from scratch, and I'll show you some more examples a little bit later. This is an executive summary dashboard, and I just want to show you the pie chart first of all. You'll see here, I don't know if you can read that at the back, but we've got 5 severity levels: critical, high, medium, low, and informational. Okay? Now, behind those severity levels of vulnerabilities lies the industry standard scoring mechanism developed by the CVSS scoring mechanism. So we just band the various scores into these severity levels so that we can produce good-looking graphs. The informational vulnerabilities are not really vulnerabilities at all. That's all of the data that we've gathered when we were doing the discovery and the profiling of our systems. So we've captured that information and we make it available to you, and I'll show you how we make use of that in a little while. What I want to draw your attention to here is the vulnerability age chart. So we're looking on this bottom row at vulnerabilities that are greater than 90 days old, and you can see we've got just under 1,000 critical vulnerabilities over 3 months old. That's something, as a security manager, I'd be really worried about. So we can delve into that. Here we get a list of all 999 critical vulnerabilities. But 1,000 critical vulnerabilities is too much work for any organization to reasonably to undertake. So what we can do here is we can start to apply filters to filter down this list, either to filter out only include the most important, or we might decide to filter it so that we see these critical vulnerabilities by department or by platform. There's lots of filters available in order to do that. What I've done on this screen is I've included this extra filter here telling me if there's an exploit available. These are the vulnerabilities, the critical and exploitable vulnerabilities that are the most important for you to solve as quickly as possible. And you can see that list of 999 has actually been shortened down to 625. Still a large number of things to actually fix in the environment. So we have lots of other analysis tools that will help you to visualize or to prioritize the tasks that need to be taken. This one, for example, is looking at our vulnerabilities from a user responsibility perspective. So we've already assigned groups of assets to different users. This could be based on the platform, the host platform. It could be based on the location of the devices. It's really up to you how you decide to assign user ownership. What we can see here is that this guy at the bottom, he's either been very lucky and not been exposed to many vulnerabilities, or he's done really well and he's managed to close down a lot of to fix a lot of those vulnerabilities in his environment. But what this also shows is this guy at the top is struggling. He's either struggling because he's just unlucky, maybe he's looking after Windows and there are more vulnerabilities for that, or he's just overwhelmed with other work. So what this allows us to do is make a business decision about allocating resource. We might decide that we might hire a contractor for a couple of weeks to help the guy at the top reduce the number of vulnerabilities here. Or we might just say, the guy listed here, just help this guy at the top out for a couple of days a week until the vulnerabilities are more evenly matched. Another analysis tool runs an algorithm which tells us, or gives us a remediation summary, and it gives us lists of vulnerabilities to fix with a risk reduction score. Now, based on this, and again, I apologize if you can't see the actual text at the back, but based on these scores, if we just do the first 4 items there, we've reduced our overall risk posture, the overall risk, by about, just under 50%. Okay? So we provide lots of tools based on the data that we've, and analysis tools looking at the data that we've already captured that will help you prioritize what vulnerabilities to fix first, depending on what your particular circumstances are. Now, I mentioned the log correlation engine. When the log correlation engine receives logs, it'll normalize them, and it'll also categorize them as well. And I'm going to use this example here. This is login failures that have occurred over, the whole chart is a 24-hour period, so this is about, 6 hours this represents here. This is just my demo data that I was playing around with yesterday. So login failures could be a login failure from a Windows system, or a Linux system, or an application, the actual log message that you get from each of those different situations is going to have different text. The log format is going to be different. So what we're able to do is identify that they're all representing a login failure and then classify them as login failure here to make it easier to see what type of events are taking place in your environment. If we start to drill down on that, we start to get a normalized event summary. These are all the different login failures that we've had in the different devices in our environment. And we've got SSH failed passwords. There's 653 of those. That seems like quite a lot, based on my own knowledge of my network. So I'm going to drill down on that even further. And you can see we've got 2 IP addresses where these login failures are originating from. And now what I can do is drill right down into the raw syslog, and we can see that these 2 IP addresses are trying to log on to trying to guess our root password. Okay, so that's the log correlation engine as well. Now, remember I said I told you about the informational vulnerabilities that we detect when we do the discovery and the profiling of the assets. Remember, we've captured all of that information and made it available to you. So what we can start to do in the asset section is start to group our systems into various asset groups depending on various properties. So, for example, we could pick the client applications group and say, okay, we'll group or put all of the hosts that have a particular application installed into a single group. Once you've got that asset group, you don't need to worry about the IP address. You just start performing actions on the group, like running reports or running further scans. So let's just run through a quick example. So I've clicked on that client applications. Let's imagine that our corporate web browser in our pretend company is Internet Explorer. And as such, we've been patching Internet Explorer every time a new update comes out from Microsoft, making sure that, that there's no vulnerabilities and we're not putting our company at risk. However, we've just suddenly got wind that a couple of our users have been using Firefox. So what we want to do is investigate, how many of our users or how many instances of Firefox there are in our environment. So I can create an asset group just by clicking on the button over there. When I do that, you'll see here it says it's actually calculating. What it's doing is it's enumerating how many instances of Firefox it's seen when it's done its previous discovery and profiling. And on the next screen, you'll see, look, there's 558 instances, or over 500 instances of Firefox in our environment. Now, that would be a big problem for me if I was thinking that Internet Explorer is the web browser that we've been patching and keeping up to date, and now suddenly I've seen there are over 500 instances of Firefox in my environment. I've got a big problem because I haven't been patching Firefox. Okay, so using the metadata that we've captured when we do our profiling means that we can start to get a much better visibility, much better insight into what's going on in our organization. So that was based on a built-in template looking at client applications. We can also create our own custom asset groups. I'm going to give you an example of a dynamic a custom asset. And again, just give you an example of where this might be useful. Let's imagine we want to roll out a new version of an application. I'm going to use Adobe Reader as an example. So we've asked the operations team, the operations guys, to roll out this new version. And the reason why is because the old version has a security flaw or something like that. They come back to us and say, okay, yeah, we've done it. Yeah, we've completed it. It took us a couple of weeks, but we've rolled out across all our systems, and everyone now has the new version of Adobe Reader. Now, I don't believe them as a security guy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a dynamic group. And in this instance, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a regular expression to look at the plugin text. Don't worry about all the detail necessarily, but we can basically use a regular expression to look for applications that have been discovered on our systems. So you can see I'm using Adobe Reader, and I've got the version number there as well. Now, I'm not a great regular expression creator, so I do have to have help from the internet. So you might see a couple of mistakes in that. So I won't dwell too much on my regular expression. But if you look at the result of that, I've called it the Adobe Reader old version check. It's calculating it. And, I didn't capture the screenshot. But, we would have seen, once it had calculated, enumerated how many instances of the old version, we would see which of our systems still had the old version on, and we would be able to then, get back to the operations guys and let them know about it. I mentioned dashboards at the beginning of the session. The other grey area of the product is the reporting section, where again there are hundreds of reports built into the product available for you to use out of the box, and we're continually creating new content for these. This is just a few of the reports that are available. If you go to our website, you can go to that page and you'll see all of the reports available with really good examples, of the reports that we have. Let's take a look at some of the dashboards that are built in. Understand that compliance and configuration compliance is a big thing here in Turkey. So, here's an example of PCI. We don't just do vulnerability detection, we can also do configuration assessment as well. So using Nessus, you can confirm that your systems are configured the way that you want them to be. This is a dashboard showing you how our systems compare or are faring in the PCI world. This one is looking at our passive vulnerability scanner. So this is just looking at the types of vulnerabilities and the type of traffic that our scanner has detected passively by looking at the network traffic. And I'm pleased to see no one has been browsing anything in that top right-hand corner. And once again, all of these dashboards and examples of these dashboards can be found if you follow that link on our website. Okay, here's my picture back. This is the picture you should have seen earlier. Okay, so remember I talked about the Fitbit for security. Asset discovery, vulnerabilities, controlling access to the network and user access, and looking at malware defenses. Well, with the release of version 5 of Security Center, which was earlier this year, we introduced something called the assurance report cards. This is our first step in trying to take all of the technical information that we gather, all the technical details, and allowing you to roll those up into business objectives. So if you think about these underlying controls over here, these are things that we can measure using our technology. The first one there, check all Windows clients for no malware indicators. That's something that we can measure. Those three items can roll up into this policy statement, which is that we don't want any compromised laptops with malware processes running on them. That, along with these other policy statements, can roll up into this business objective, which is to detect and prevent malware and intruders. So that relates to our malware defense metric that we had listed at the bottom there. So once we've rolled all those up, what we can do is we can display them. We call them assurance report cards. Here's the assurance report cards for the critical cyber controls that the 5 critical cyber controls that Tenable come up with. Number 1, maintain an inventory of software and hardware, and the 5th one there is the malware and intruders. Now, we're failing on all of them because we've got the cross and a red background. If I expand one of them, you'll start to see the policy statements here that make up that overarching business goal. Okay? So that's the assurance report cards, which makes it easier for a security department to start reporting back to the business and showing value to the business by aligning the security requirements to the business goals. Okay, so my name is Jason Clark. I've shown you briefly a few screenshots of Tenable's Security Center continuous view. If you want to see more, we're out on the stand just outside. Come and see us. I've got a demo environment, and also SimTurk or Innovera have some really trained up guys that can help you and demonstrate this for you in local language if you wish. Okay, have we got time for questions? Time is over. Okay, come and ask me questions out the back if you want to. Thank you very much.
So sorry, my name is Paul Ristoja. I'm coming from I'll give you a sort of a grounding on where I'm coming from, what company. But one thing that we can probably agree on as security people, I've been listening to a lot of vendors during today, and obviously people are always saying that the people are the most important asset in your company. I would disagree partly because we all know that data is the most important part in our company. So that's the most expensive stuff that you have inside your IT or inside your company. Data sanitization. So how many of you are familiar of data sanitization? Not many hands. So it doesn't mean, I can tell you that it doesn't mean cleaning the data. It means getting rid of the data eternally, forever, without a trace. That you can't do reverse engineering to get it back, period. I'll give you some examples quickly. Got only 30 minutes, so probably there will be no questions again during this presentation. So what, why, when and how you should do it. So again, a buzzword. You all heard about cybersecurity until you're tired of it. Everybody's talking about cybersecurity, obviously. When you're a CIO, CISO, security manager, so forth, you need to take care of this, and you're attacked continuously. But there's, in our minds, obviously, we are selling this. So data eraser is one elementary small part of the cybersecurity strategy that you should have in place. So why not take care of the small part also? Because as one vendor wisely said when we were discussing, he said that there will always be a hole. There will always be a hole. You can't protect your data from everything all the time. So where do I come from? Where does the company come from? You know, this very beautiful small country, about 5 million people in the north, very close to the North Pole. So once upon a time, 18 years ago, there was a hospital that got rid of their old servers and they formatted them. And then, for some reason, the new owner found out 6,000 patient records inside the servers, and they publicized them. So what, obviously, they lost their reputation, the hospital lost their reputation, it became public. And two guys established this company 18 years ago because of this incident. And also you might remember Finland, if you remember something, you remember that we used to be very good at designing and building phones, mobile phones. And then about 8 years ago, smartphones came along and we lost the touch. And now every one of you has 1 or 2 smartphones in their pockets. All your workers, employees have smartphones full of company data in most cases. So think about that also when you think about the strategy. And you know, 18 years ago also, as some grounding about our company, we didn't have a garage in the Silicon Valley. This is a small city, 500 kilometers from Helsinki, 2 guys with only 1 car. That's how they started. And 18 years later, 50,000 erasers a day are done globally, all around the world, by hundreds of thousands of customers, Fortune 100 customers also, as said, all around the world, every day. Despite if there's regulation or no regulation, companies are still thinking about their security. And we are spread around, so if you have global operations, we have global operations. We are small, but we are global, so we can support you also globally. So what it is? So there has to be a definition. There are several definitions, obviously, but the basic rule is that, as you know, a data eraser is simply writing zeros and ones using different algorithms over the existing data. That's it. That's very simple. Anyone can write a program like that, don't they? But the National Institute of Standards and Technology in US, they define this. So I would recommend also this institute does sort of publications regularly. And this is from December 2014. They do also recommendations, and as do the standards organizations. But they define the sanitization so that it's infeasible for a given level of effort. So it means that it can't be sort of reverse engineered back. But you know, download the documents and read them, because even the executive summary gives you really good information. You don't have to read these 50-page documents all through. And then obviously, I don't know how many of you are familiar. This is by the way, one of the other guy who established this company. And he is showing here very familiar way of data erasure for most people. Obviously, physical destruction. But come on, how stupid can you be? Because you can reuse it, you can resell it, you can, after sanitizing the data, you can do whatever. So don't do this. And it's been shown that if you're not burning it into dust, you can recover the data from even destroyed disks. And we have several companies. We have also one company that we cooperate very closely with, IBA Scroll On Track, that is doing recoveries from impossible stuff, burned disks and so forth. And obviously the other is encryption. And obviously that's most of the cases it's safe. But as we all know, even SSL is compromised. So what's safe? This hasn't been compromised yet. And very, very basic stuff, because I was told that the awareness here is low. But and also because I was in Dubai a few weeks ago in a big affair, in exhibition, and there was a IT security manager from a big, let's say financially big country, and the guy said that isn't formatting enough. I was like, come on, you must be joking. But they are still formatting the disks. So the left one is the format to delete, obviously. And as you know, the allegory here is that you have a book, and then you format the book. You take away only the index here, obviously. And when you take away the index, what do you have left? You have the data left here. So when the data is left somewhere, someone has tools to recover it, period. But if you do certified data erasure using, for example, our software, using one of the 19 different algorithms that you can select, it's permanently gone. And certifications, what does it mean? Third-party certification bodies do the certifications. So we are not buying obviously we're investing to get the certifications, but they are investigating our software through even the source code, getting through what we are doing, in order to find out that we are really safe, that we can be recommended to different departments of defense, armies, police forces, so forth, and big corporations, obviously. And a broader definition, take the erasure technology, and then let's say, implement a process. Don't do it as an isolated way. Just today I feel unsafe and I need to buy this, and tomorrow I will forget it. Put it as part of your overall data security strategy. And then what's extremely important, one of the most important things, obviously, after the safe erasure is that you got an audit trail. So if the big guys come after you, 2 years from now, asking evidence, you have to have evidence that you have actually done it. So you get a report that is digitally sort of undersigned, and you can't tamper with the report. So why should you do it? Is there, that's again very, word disruption. It's everywhere, all over the place. You might throw me some eggs if I mention the word disruption, because everybody's talking about disruption now. But data erasure is part of getting over the cloud security pain point. So this is a research done at cloud service providers, or for example, if you're using cloud service providers, if you're a cloud service provider yourself, you know that your biggest pain point is security, period. No question about that. And also this is pretty familiar. We are using this also, that if you have confidential files wandering around your network, accidents will happen and will definitely happen, as this ex-NSA official is saying here. So there's always a way that they get into your confidential files, and they have ways to smell, get the smell of the confidential files also. And what's really scary is that obviously they built techniques where they always get into the deleted files, because deleted files most often are the most confidential files. And you think that you're safe when you delete a file. And you say, obviously, some of you say, I've been meeting customers also here in Ankara and Istanbul, and they are saying that, we don't have any regulation, we don't have to do anything. Well, but you're part of the global, community. You're in the internet, you're everywhere, you're in the network. So you should be thinking about this, even though you don't have a local regulation. But for example, the EU General Data Protection regulation that is coming early, hopefully early next year, that will define that everybody who is operating inside EU, including the big US corporations, are under the regulation, and they are prosecuted if they will sort of break it. Because as you've already heard, I think that the safe harbor is gone. So the big guys like Google and Facebook, they are not anymore covered. So they have to establish their local data centers here in Europe a lot more than now. So the right to be forgotten has said that if you want to get rid of your data when you leave your company or leave a service, you need to get a report. And how to get a report? Well, use Blancco software, get rid of the data, and you get a report. Or let's say the ISO standards. Well, the ISO standard, even if you don't have a regulation, you have ISO standards anyway. And you might be using them when convincing your customers or convincing customers or corporates and companies that you're working according to ISO standards. And then we have this Cloud Industry Security Alliance. And I just got that one because you have it in Turkey also. So if you're operating, as said, in this industry, if you're using cloud service providers, connect them also, ask about their recommendations. Because this is what they say. Include data end-of-life erasure with auditable reporting into your cloud security ecosystem. It doesn't get any more clear. So if you're a cloud service provider, if you're a customer of a cloud service provider, you can demand that. Because it's your data, it's not their data. So they need to add into this cycle of information the destroy there also. But again, if you're working with those, connect with the Cloud Security Alliance in Turkey. And then the ISO 27001, well, that's short story from one small rich country in Middle East. Customer says that I don't need your software because we have the ISO 27001 already. We're like, how can you have it if you don't fulfill it? So in the next audit, they will lose the standard if they don't do this. Because in the standard, it's a requirement. It's not a recommendation. It's a requirement that you need to get rid of the removed or securely overwritten prior to disposal or reuse. So there's no question about it. If you want the standard, make sure that you put in place the proper rules. And also, this is the newest. It has to do with the cloud service providers mostly, and IT service providers, 27040. And they also include the virtual level there. And that's obviously good news for us because we have software where you can erase virtual machines. You can files from the system and also logical units inside data centers. But again, you can get your hand into these documents if needed from the ISO organization. And then when should you do this? Is there any rules or something like that? Well, this is something that becomes to everybody's mind. Well, yeah, obviously the end of life, PCs, laptops, smartphones, tablets. You can't even imagine how many companies I've met or my colleagues have met that don't have any solution on the smartphones and the tablets because they think that the operator that provides them the devices will take care of it. But please don't. You have gigabytes of confidential information lying in the devices. So if you get rid of the device, make sure that it's empty. But then, if you have a data center, there's a certain amount of hard disks that will fail every year. A certain percentage of your total amount of hard disk will fail. That you know as a professional, obviously. So what do? Do you return them to manufacturer? Well, most often not, because they're full of data. You can't do it. Well, then you lose money. So why don't you get a solution in place where you erase the disks before they are failing You can erase the disks and then you can return them to the vendor that you have selected, and then you get refund. So we have some customers that are saving tens of thousands of euros every year, data center customers using our software. So with our software, so you can basically do over 200 drives simultaneously, erasing. Or one good example of decommissioning, big SANs. You have Capgemini that is obviously working around the world. Sometimes not a good example, but I took it because they needed to erase 2 SANs located in the Nordics. Most probably it was in Stockholm area. But they needed to have some good solution, quick solution to do it remotely. And we provided that, so they did it remotely from Poland, from their big operation center. So the end result, they could get them back, get a refund, get the new equipment in place, and a lot cheaper, obviously, when returning the working, let's say in this case, EMC storage arrays. Or you have a lot of different operations going on when you're running a data center, obviously. You're doing let's say data migration within data centers, obviously. What do you do with the data residing in the old devices, for example, old storage arrays? Do you forget it? Do you just send the device somewhere? Please don't. Disaster recovery exercises. You're doing mirroring over the network somewhere to another site, and the data resides again there after the disaster recovery test or the exercise. So you should erase it before you're doing something, before you let it be there. And so forth and so forth. There's a lot of examples what you should be thinking about when you're running a data center operation. And then obviously the latest arrival in our family is that because virtually everything is virtualized. So you need to be able to erase the virtual machines also. That's, for example, if you're using a service provider, sort of to take away the pain that you can't always invest to the latest technology, you need to rent virtual machines for 1 month. But you need to make sure that when you leave the service, that you get always a report that it's erased, that nobody tells you that it will eventually be overwritten, within months. You need to be absolutely sure that your data is always overwritten, and you get a report when you leave the service. And that's something that you can require when you use these services. VMware is here because that's our closest cooperative company. So we have embedded also our software so that when you're using their delete commands, it starts Blancco programs there. And then obviously the how. So as said, it's a bit dull, but process. Think about it as a process. You have the asset level or the physical level, let's say asset end of life, and then you have data, because you should have data, the information management policies also, data lifecycle management policies there. So you should be able to not only get rid of the data in your devices, but get rid of the data during the life. So by sort of intelligent scripting, you can make sure that every time, for example, your one military example quickly, whenever a military worker or these armed forces, they close their device, our program goes into the recycle bin and overwrites it always, every time, so that there's no human error. So there's nothing left in the recycle bin that is sort of vulnerable or confidential. And then different levels, obviously, when you think about the file logical and virtual levels, as said. You can erase these logical units in SANs in big data centers. It doesn't care if you define the LAN and it erases the LAN that is defined in the system. So we are just using the system that you have built already. Well, and the virtual eraser, I said VMware and so forth. And the file eraser, this is one of the let's say most vulnerable places also, where you have confidential files wandering around the network. And then total erasure on the physical level. Am I running out of time already? Because I heard hand claps there from the other room. And then few customer case examples, obviously, because I'm not just inventing this stuff. We have some really good ones, 2 good ones from Germany and one from Philippines, but you might think this SAP was one of our key collaborators behind the fact that we developed the logical unit LAN erasure. Because when they had their, they have their data centers in Germany and all over the world, and they are running customer tests in there. Well, what happens after they have run real data tests in their environment? Well, the customer gets a bit restless at what happens to my data after I've decided not to take SAP, right? If I decide to take SAP, but it's still there, it resides in the data center. So they contacted us and asked, like, can you develop a solve this issue? And our guys sat down and started to write code, and now it's a product. It's been a product for over 5 years already. And BMW, well, it's a private company, but it's pretty big, and it's global. And they started with only laptops, workstations, then some servers, then smartphones, and then they decided that now that we have the process, we can multiply the process globally. And now they are operating globally with Blancco. So we helped them build data erasure management process inside their data security team. So we're always part of a security team. And Globe is a big telco from Philippines. I had to take some exotic stuff here also. But so there's a lot of big corporations, big IT companies. The biggest customers are obviously the military customers globally. As said, ministers of internal affairs, police, so forth. And also these big multinationals and locals. So our customers basically the variety is like from one, let's say 50 people to 300,000 people. So you can find a fit everywhere. And then obviously some final comments. We might have some time for questions because I'm running this through so quickly, and I can't even breathe. So you have to. So what not to do? I thought a little bit, should I use this? But this is a real life example. You might not believe it, but it's true. There is a city in Norway, even more beautiful country than Finland, obviously, Norway. Time is over. Just 1 minute. So there's an undertaker that takes care also of the security for some reason, the municipality undertaker. So they found out that he skipped some corners by always when putting the casket into the ground, he had some hard disks in the casket. So he was really burying the hard disks, and that's how he got paid, because he was secure. But they found it out, and then obviously that was smashed. And the other thing is that when you use a device, when the life cycle of a device is like 5 years, 88% of the energy consumed is done when it's produced. So please try to use it as long as possible, because that's saves our resources, and you can reuse, you can donate, you can sell, but first you should do the data sanitization there. Thank you. So no questions. Time is over. So please come to our eData booth, and we'll help you there forward. Thank you.
I knew I shouldn't have got the graveyard shift. So, I can get through this fairly quickly. If I speak quickly, I will enunciate if I can. And if you don't ask any questions, we'll be over and done really quickly. You can ask questions, of course. And I'll be outside afterwards if you don't want to ask questions within the group. So my name's Graham. I'm from Phishlabs. So what does that mean? We're a laboratory that protects our customers against phishing, essentially. We have a group of people in a room with brains the size of planets, and they fight back on behalf of our customers. So the title is Detect and Mitigate Cyber Attacks Before Devastation. Devastation is probably a strong term. However, as we've seen from some of the examples in the press, that often does happen. So I didn't want this to be a kind of a corporate pitch or telling you about Phishlabs and how good we are and what we do. There will be a little bit of that, but mainly what I wanted to do was to share with you some of the things that we see. We have a global footprint. We get an incredible amount of threat intelligence from our partners. And we see an enormous amount of what goes on, not only in the web, but also the dark web. So I'm going to go a little bit into understanding the attack vectors, and then the advancements that we're seeing in malware, how we deal with that, the emerging trends that we see, and then the fight back. How do we fight back against these guys? And that's the key thing, because you can do all the awareness training, putting people in the classroom, sending them phishing emails. No matter what you do, someone somewhere is still going to click. So a little bit about who we are, very briefly. We're an American company. We have a SOC 24/7 by 365, and these people fight back on behalf of our customers. And it's all about the exploitation of people. Because, as you may have seen earlier from some of the earlier presentations, 91% of targeted attacks use phishing or spear phishing. And no matter how much training you do, 1 in 5 will click. Fact. If you can get your click rate down below 20%, you're doing very well as an organization. And they're after all sorts of various things. Normally it's customer information, account information, intellectual property. But they use phishing to do this. Phishing or spear phishing. Because it's the easy way in. You don't need to be a sophisticated hacker to do this. It's pretty easy to buy a phish kit and away you go. Because it's the people they're trying to exploit. It's the people that click. It's the people that are the weak point of any organization, simply because you can't patch them. You cannot patch people. You can try and train them, make them aware, but they get a spearfish that is something relevant to what they were doing last weekend, or they get a spearfish that is relevant to where they went on holiday or relevant to their hobby. Very, very well crafted, and they will click. So it helps if you can stop these attacks before the compromise. It helps if you can recognize the attempt, and then it helps if you can understand the tradecraft, and then it helps if you know how to mitigate the threat. Those 3 things: recognize what it is, understand how the bad guys are doing it, and then mitigate that threat. If you can do those 3 things, then you're doing really well. So how are they coming in? What are the vectors where these guys are approaching organizations? So obviously in the past, the banks have been the target. Not necessarily the banks, but their customers. Trying to compromise their customers. Customers are getting emails that look like they're from their bank and they're not. Employees are getting spearphished, top executives are getting spearphished. So every vector where you would interact either with your bank or some institution is where the guys are coming in. Phishing and spearphishing, vishing. You get an SMS, it's a smish, that says call this number. You call the number and you've got a call center. So this is cybercrime as a service. These guys have set up specific call centers to take your credentials. It sounds like your bank. You've got a real person on the end of the phone. Crimeware, I'll cover that more in a moment, along with the malware, banking trojans, etc. And then rogue mobile apps is another increasing vector where we're seeing rogue apps set up on the app stores that pretend to be your organization, but they're actually more unfortunate than that when somebody downloads them. And this brings it more into perspective, because behind all of this, because everyone goes, yeah, it's great, I see all these attacks, but I'm not really sure. These are the actual people, some of the bad guys that are doing this. Some of these guys are setting up forums. They're setting up places to trade credentials. This guy at the bottom, I can't even pronounce his name, Ivjivani, him, the bald guy. He's the original author of Zeus. Okay? Zeus, and more recently Game Over Zeus, are the methods used to deliver CryptoLocker, which is ransomware. And I understand you guys have seen a lot of this in Turkey. We see it globally. It's dying off now as it gets replaced with more serious things. But ransomware is a big problem, because once it's loaded on your machine, that's it. Specific files are encrypted, and unless you pay so many bitcoins, then you're not going to get it uncrypted. You've lost that data for good. And us as a security company, we can go in and we can take down the command and control. We can do that. But if we do that, then you're never going to get your data back, because that's your only link to the bad guy that's got the encryption key to unlock your files. But you have to pay him some bitcoins. And we've seen something like nearly $40 million in Bitcoin transactions just because of CryptoLocker. So this puts a face to some of the bad guys. They've all got their own individual things they do, and it's not pleasant. So what do? We invest in security technology. So a new threat comes out, vendor produces a new magic box, Gartner produce a new magic quadrant, and lo and behold, this box seems to be in the top right-hand corner of the Gartner Magic Quadrant, because they paid Gartner a lot of money to be able to do that, and it could actually be good technology. But then what happens is when you first deploy it, then that technology really begins to work well because it's new. The bad guys aren't really too aware of it, but as they become aware of it, and the appliance itself or the piece of software gradually becomes known, then it becomes more pervasive. So the more and more you see this technology, the more and more the bad guys target it and are able to circumvent that and come up with a way either through it or around it. And so the usefulness of new security technologies is fairly limited based on the first few months. Because then you need to look for the next big thing and try and pay for that and deploy it. So it's a bit like an arms race. We come out with new fraud prevention controls. As soon as they're deployed, the bad guys come out with ways around it, evasion techniques. Okay, so transaction monitoring, normalized transactions, certificates, SSL, man-in-the-middle attacks, blah, 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 blah as we go through. These ones down the bottom, this is what's coming next week and next month. And as we deploy new technologies, you put that appliance or that piece of software in place, bad guys come up with some way around it. And then the same thing happens again, and then again. And we've seen this trend over years and years and years. And then the vendors come out with next generation. What are they going to come out with in a couple of years when it actually is the next generation? What are they going to call that? And the bad guys are more and more spending more and more money. They're getting very sophisticated. This is what we use in terms of mapping new malware. So we see a new piece of malware. These are what we call the observables. The more of these that we can find out about the piece of malware, then the more able we are to mitigate against it and to reverse engineer it and then find a way around it. So I'm not going to go into all of them, simply because I can't. They're very complex, and we have special people that are there to be able to pull all of this out of each one of those. But these are the observables of a piece of malware, from the network behaviors, the host behaviors, the artifacts, the specific actors involved. We're looking at who's behind this, who's developed it, how many forum posts have they got, what forum posts are they. We're looking at all of this stuff all the time. And then for each piece of malware, we map it. It's kind of a spidergram. The bigger the shaded area, the more impact this piece of malware is going to have on an organization. So we look at things like their operational capabilities. This is the actual operational capabilities of the groups that do this, the threat actors themselves. We look at their development capability, how well funded they are, where are they getting their money from. We have human intelligence that penetrates the dark web. We're looking at all of the forums. We have our own forums on the dark web where we're looking to extract this kind of information. We know how well funded these guys are. Their reputation. How much damage does this thing do once it's in the wild? How prevalent is it? How much of it are we seeing globally? And then we look at the trend on a 5-year basis and then on a 1-year basis. And then we map all that together. The bigger the shaded area, the more badder it is. There's probably not a Turkish word for badder. There's not an English word for it either. It's not a word. The worse it becomes. And so we map all of this stuff, and we do this for every single piece of malware and crimeware and banking Trojan that we see. And this is some of them. Defunct or in decline, game overviews, Shylock, Carburb. The ones here established, we're seeing more and more variations in things like Vortrack, Citadel, new game over Zeus. We're seeing lots of this one begin to come out now. And then the emerging threats in terms of Dire, Kadar, Cyavax, we're seeing lots of these. And then what we do is we map all of this information and we come up with what we call our tragic quadrant. Some of you may look at the Gartner Magic Quadrants for all the different aspects that they do, and they do a very good job. So we've developed this tragic quadrant of malware. This helps us to track the capability of every single piece of malware. So in terms of its capability, north to south, execution, east to west. Then again, where we need to target, where we need to focus our time, is mitigating what's in the top right-hand corner of the Phishlabs tragic quadrant. So you see up there, Drydex, Vortrack, Dire, all of these are really coming strong now. We're seeing lots of them globally. So this shows us how or where to fight back. Where do we need to focus our team and our resources on to really work in mitigating these threats for our customers? And it's that top right-hand corner, that magic quadrant. Something else which helps us to track this, so we can see the relative prevalence. So if you think about which company would you go to find out what's bad on all of the machines that you're running, Microsoft. Okay, your machines are feeding back to Microsoft all of this information on a daily basis. These are the global installs in terms of Microsoft Security Essentials. These are the global installs, and these are the things that it's seeing at the top. Again, this shows us where to focus our resource. These are the things we're seeing. These are the things that Microsoft are seeing. Dyer, Vortrack, Zeus, Game Over Zeus. Same names are coming up all the time. So these are the kind of things that we're seeing. These are the kind of things that we're tracking for our customers. These are, because we have so much visibility into the global internet and to dark web, this is what we see. The malware is evolving, as I've just explained, getting very, very sophisticated. Some of this malware even checks itself. So things like Vortrack will load a keylogger. That keylogger then grabs keystrokes, etc., etc., and then it actually tests itself before it sends the stuff to the bad guy to see whether it's any good. So it's validating the data it steals before it sends it to its management console. And the price is dropping. As it becomes more prevalent, the price is dropping of these things. But we're seeing things like cybercrime as a service. Some of those faces I showed you, which would be on a police crime program on TV probably, some of those guys are operating forums, which are cybercrime as a service. They're selling fish kits. They're selling malware. They're giving marketplaces to be able to trade data for bitcoins. So they're after more. They're not just after credit card information. They're not just after bank account information. They're not just after intellectual property. They're after more. They're after a complete dossier, an electronic dossier on the individual, which is called the fools. It's gaining in popularity. And these cybercrime as a service organizations actually have their own customer support. These are quite sophisticated organizations. They're companies in their own right offering cybercrime as a service. And this is the trend that we're seeing. Cybercrime as a service. He's just told me I've got 50 minutes left. Automated card verification services. So the cards are being verified before they get given to the bad guys. And then we're seeing DDoS for hire. For $50 a month, you can DDoS anybody you like. DD for BC. Anybody seen any of those guys? Distributed denial of service for Bitcoin. They send you 20 gig and then an email to the CEO that says, we sent you 20 gig yesterday. Tomorrow we're going to send you 200 gig unless you pay us so many Bitcoins. That's an organization called DD4BC. We see all of this stuff. And then they monetize the data. How much does it cost? Even for an out-of-date credit card information, you got $3, $4, $5. Full PayPal, eBay account information, $20 odd. Fresh credit card information, $32. But this is chicken feed. This is not enough for the bad guys. They want more. They want what's called the fools. They want what's called the kits. So full name and address, social security number, driving license number. And then they can sell this data for $1,500. They can sell it for even more if they've got a kits, which is actually all of the copies of these documents as well. So they don't only get the numbers, they get a full copy. And then you get down here the fool's broker. Some of those bad guys I've shown you, they are brokering this stuff. They're acting as the go-between. They're cybercrime brokers on the dark web. So how do you protect yourself? Well, you have to move the whole attack to a different place. So this would be, this works. I can't work the pointy thingy. There you go. So this is your environment. This is the big bad internet. Most of the compromise happens out here. All your customers are compromised out here. So even before they try and get in, probably these guys, the bad guys, have already got all of everything they need to go straight through all of those perimeter defenses. So over here you can get defensive, you can get reactive, but your customers are still going to lose their money. So you have to move the game plan out to here. Cybercrime operations, all these guys, drive-by downloads, phishing, whatever they're doing. But it's not just the cost of the compromise, it's the cost of what's happening in terms of fraud losses, card reissues, clean-up costs, customer support, taking all of these calls. And then as you get visibility, you can begin to start to fight back. Time to detection decreases with the more information that you have. So, protecting customers, account holder and employee education, communication, threat intelligence, proactive detection, adaptive incident response services. All of this stuff is what you need to begin to mitigate the threat. And by the way, this is what we do. We fight back 24/7 by 365. We take the bad guys down. We look at their site. We destroy their site. We kill their site. We destroy their attack kit. We destroy their phish kit. We destroy their drop sites. This is not just about customer awareness and training. This is about customer awareness and training. Oh, now we're going to fight the bad guys back. We take them down and destroy everything they've got. And in some circumstances, we can recover customer credentials. So in summary, cyber criminals have proven that they can get around most security controls. Even the newer ones, eventually they'll find a way around them. Malware is getting increasingly more sophisticated. Cybercrime as a service makes it easier and more affordable for cyber criminals to do business. They have brokers that they can just go to, sell stuff to. Makes it simple for them. So, therefore, a new approach to proactively protecting your customers and your employees and your overall brand is not an option anymore, it's a necessity. So I'm just going to leave you with some quotes from the Act of War. So the Act of War, this was 2,500 years ago. This book was written by a guy called Sun Tzu. This is what the Chinese used to fight their adversaries back 2,500 years ago. And if we just pick a couple of things out of this, attack him where he is unprepared and appear where you are not expected. That could be any cybercriminal's daily game plan. To know your enemy, you must become your enemy. This is our game plan. Phishlabs. We know their tradecraft. We fight them back, often with some of the same tools that they're fighting our customers. So in war, the way is to avoid what is strong and strike at what is weak. What is strong? Lots of network protection, data protection, endpoint protection. What is weak? The people. And lastly, engage people with what they expect. It is what they are able to discern and confirms their projections. It settles them into predictable patterns of response. Predictable patterns of response. That's why people are the weak link. Occupying their minds while you wait for the extraordinary moment, that which they cannot anticipate. That moment when they press that button and click. Suddenly, all hell breaks loose. Actually, not suddenly, because the average time to detect that you've been breached is 232 days. That's the average time that any organization knows when they've been breached. That's nearly 2/3 of the year. We find out that you were breached 2/3 of a year ago. Any questions? Thank you very much. I will be outside if you do need anything. Thank you.